Welcome to Top 10 Amazing Facts. The Titanic is remembered as a ship of dreams and a nightmare of tragedy. But beyond the romance and special effects of the movie lies a story full of real people, missed chances, and forgotten truths. In this video, we reveal 10 fascinating little-known facts about the Titanic, including a mixed-race family, heroic acts, and even dogs. Before we begin, please smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification so you never miss out on our amazing top 10 facts. Let's dive in. Number 10. A lifeboat drill. Was canceled the same day the ship sank. On April 14, 1912, the morning of the disaster, a lifeboat drill was scheduled but mysteriously canceled. No official reason was ever given. Without that practice, passengers and even crew were left unprepared and confused when the real evacuation began just hours later. This simple drill could have saved lives. 9. A fire was burning inside the ship before it even set sail. Deep within one of Titanic's coal bunkers, a fire had been smoldering for days, even before departure from Southampton. Crew members tried to manage it at sea, but it was burning near a bulkhead that later collapsed during the sinking. Some experts suggest this fire may have weakened part of the hull, making it more vulnerable when the iceberg hit. 8. The ship could hold over 3,500 people but had lifeboats for just a third of that amount. Around 2,240 people were aboard the Titanic on its maiden voyage. That included 833 first-class passengers, 614 second-class passengers, 1,006 third-class passengers, and around 900 crew members. Had the ship been full, the disaster could have claimed far more lives, especially given the ship only carried lifeboats for about 1,178 people, just one-third of full capacity or half of the people on board. At the time, outdated maritime laws only required enough lifeboats for a ship's tonnage, not the number of people. Many saw the Titanic as unsinkable, so lifeboats were seen more as formalities than necessities. Fun fact: Titanic ticket prices varied significantly depending on the class of travel. First class suite, $4,350, equivalent to over $100,000 today. First class berth, $150, about $4,600 today. Second class ticket, $60, approximately $1,800 today. Third class ticket, $35, roughly $1,000 today. First-class passengers enjoyed luxurious accommodations, including private suites, fine dining, and exclusive amenities. Second-class passengers had comfortable cabins and access to lounges, while third-class travelers, mostly immigrants seeking a new life in America, had basic but functional accommodations. 7. The richest man on board helped his pregnant wife to safety. John Jacob Astor IV, one of the wealthiest men in the world at the time, was aboard with his young pregnant wife, Madeline. He asked if he could join her in a lifeboat due to her condition, but was denied. Worth around $87 million at the time, over $2 billion today, Astor died in the sinking. He was last seen smoking a cigarette and giving his life jacket to a woman. His body was recovered with over $2,500 in cash still in his pockets. 6th, Titanic had a daily newspaper printed on board. The ship published its own first-class newspaper, the Atlantic Daily Bulletin. It included news updates, stock prices, horse racing results, and ads. It was printed right on the ship using a small press. It was part of the luxurious experience offered to the Titanic's wealthiest passengers. 5. The ship's chief baker survived in freezing water for 2 hours. Charles Juin, Titanic's chief baker, survived the icy Atlantic for nearly 2 hours, longer than most others. How? He drank whiskey before the sinking and was heavily intoxicated, which may have helped him stay calm and keep his blood circulating. He was eventually pulled into a lifeboat and survived with only swollen feet. His tale is one of the most unbelievable survival stories from the disaster. 4. Titanic had 12 dogs on board, and 3 actually survived. Several first-class passengers brought their pet dogs aboard the Titanic. While most were kept in the ship's kennel and tragically perished, 3 small dogs were smuggled into lifeboats by their owners. A Pomeranian with Margaret Hayes, a Pekingese with Henry Sleeper Harper, and another Pomeranian with Elizabeth Rothschild. 3. A Japanese survivor was publicly shamed at home. The only Japanese passenger aboard the Titanic was Masabumi Hosono, a civil servant from Japan. He was traveling in second class when the ship struck the iceberg. Hosono managed to survive by boarding a lifeboat, but his survival was met with public disgrace in Japan. At the time, the idea of honorable sacrifice was deeply ingrained in Japanese culture, and many believed he should have gone down with the ship rather than save himself. He was ostracized by the press and government, and even lost his job temporarily. However, he later regained his position and continued working until his death in 1939. His handwritten account of the disaster, written on Titanic stationery, remains one of the few first-hand survivor testimonies from the tragedy. 2. A mixed-race family was aboard in second class. Joseph LaRoche was a black Haitian-born engineer, not a doctor, as sometimes misreported. His wife, Juliette Lafargue, was a white French woman. They were traveling with their two young daughters, Simone and Louise. The LaRoches were traveling in second class. They had been living in France but were returning to Haiti due to racial discrimination that prevented Joseph from finding work despite being highly educated. Originally booked on another ship, they were transferred to the Titanic because the other ship did not allow children in the dining saloon. What happened to them? When the Titanic began to sink, Joseph LaRoche ensured Juliette and their daughters were placed safely in a lifeboat. Joseph did not survive. His body was never recovered. Juliette and both daughters survived the disaster. Joseph LaRoche is believed to have been the only black passenger in second class and possibly the only black adult male passenger on the Titanic. 1. The wreck wasn't found. Until 1985, the wreck of the Titanic was discovered on September 1, 1985, lying 12,500 feet or 3,800 meters below the surface of the North Atlantic Ocean, about 370 miles off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada. The discovery was led by Dr. Robert Ballard, an oceanographer from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, in collaboration with the French Research Institute for the Exploitation of the Sea. Ballard's team used a remotely operated submersible named Argo, which was equipped with cameras capable of transmitting live images from the ocean floor. The first sign of the wreck was the Titanic's giant boilers, followed by the bow section, which was still largely intact. However, the stern was heavily damaged, likely due to the force of impact when it hit the seabed. The Titanic was found in two main pieces, with a debris field stretching over 2,000 feet, 600 meters, between them. The wreck was covered in rusticles, iron-eating bacteria, slowly consuming the ship. Since its discovery, numerous expeditions have explored the site, recovering artifacts and documenting the ship's deterioration. The discovery of the Titanic sparked debates over ownership, conservation, and artifact retrieval, with some arguing that the wreck should remain undisturbed as a memorial. Over time, the wreck has continued to deteriorate, and scientists predict that it may disappear entirely by 2030 due to bacterial decay. It was as a groundbreaking moment in maritime history, revealing the final resting place of one of the most famous ships ever built. The discovery reignited global interest in the Titanic story and led to many of the underwater images we now know today. Bonus fact: the families of the Titanic victims received compensation, but it was far from adequate given the scale of the tragedy. The White Star Line, the company that owned the Titanic, faced numerous legal claims from survivors and families of victims. The final settlement in December 1915 amounted to $664,000, which was divided among the claimants. On average, this worked out to roughly $950 per person, which, adjusted for inflation, would be around $22,000 today. Additionally, relief funds were established to support survivors and families. The Titanic Relief Fund, set up by the American Red Cross, raised approximately $162,000 in the U.S., while the British component raised $2,250,000. The compensation varied depending on factors such as class on board, loss of personal belongings, injuries sustained, and loss of loved ones. First-class passengers generally received higher settlements compared to those in lower classes. It was a complex legal process, and many lawsuits were settled out of court, while others went to trial. The Titanic wasn't just a ship, it was a floating world filled with hidden stories, courageous acts, and forgotten lives. If you learned something new today, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to Top 10 Amazing Facts, and tap the bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the real story is better than the movie.